Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Saturday, December 19th, 2020, 10 a.m. Central, in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Well, it's Saturday. That means it's GM Review Day. And something that is still available on DriveThruRPG and other One Bookshelf sites is the first edition Rogues Gallery, as you see pictured here. It is an interesting mix. If you're a first edition DM, it's something to consider. It is $5 in PDF form. That way you could print out. And, if you get the original, you'd either have to tear it apart or have to photocopy pages anyway. So really, getting a PDF of this is, I think, more ideal. I mean, granted, you could just mark them up and not cut the book apart and just write stuff in the book and stuff. But, I don't know. If you got a hold of a pristine one of these, I think you'd want to keep it pristine and make copies of things anyway, so probably a good idea. I'll leave a link in the show notes for where you can get it, but if you went to DriveThruRPG and search by the Rogues Gallery, it would come up pretty fast. Let me read what they say about it. No longer will you, the Dungeon Master, need to spend precious time laboring over the task generating non-player characters. This valuable booklet, I'm going to move it over here because then I can see it better. I can bigify it. There we go. This valuable booklet contains hundreds of pre-rolled non-player characters of all classes and types, complete with alignments, sex, gender, personalities, and much more. The Rogues Gallery is specially designed to be compatible with advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It will save you time in creating your non-player characters, thus allowing you to pursue the other interesting aspects of your campaign. Brian Cook, David Cook, Gene Wells, all involved in this project. Brian Bloom, David Cook, Gene Wells, okay. Was the first in a series of GMing supplements for AD&D. It was published in January 1980. So this is its 40th anniversary. We have, by the way, this history. Let me just mention that the person who does the details behind the product on DriveThruRPG is Shannon Applecline. He's the editor-in-chief of RPG.net and author of Designers and Dragons. That's a great, I think currently 5-volume series, each on a different decade of gaming. I think he's been working on his next volume. And with 2020 coming to a close, I imagine that is on the horizon. But we will see. A history of role-playing industry told one company at a time. Oh, I know what I saw he was working on. He was working on an expanded view, because this work that he does details things based on the movers and the shakers, those that were most influential or had products that were hugely popular or turning points or innovative. I think he's expanded on that a little further out because you can only fit so much material in one retrospective, and obviously 80s and onward. In the 70s, you've got a certain number of companies that you can focus on. When you get into the 80s, there's a lot of companies. Now, a lot of them maybe weren't that innovative, and you could leave them out of a work like he's working on, Designers and Dragons. But then you get into the 90s and the 2000s and the D20 boom and all of that. And there's a lot more to keep track of and put in there. And I think it's true going into the 2010s that there's more. But Shannon Appelkline is the one who Drive Through RBG brought on board to put these histories together for each of these products. And this one is no exception. Let's read that product history. You can check it out yourself in more detail. Rogues Gallery lacks an apostrophe, keeping in the style of a D&D 1E Dungeon Master's Guide, for instance, Player's Handbook. Origins, GM Aids. Judges Guild began publishing Game Master Aids for D&D in 1976, so TSR followed shortly thereafter. Geomorphic maps and random listings of treasures and monsters came first. I just recently picked up, I saw in my alerts there was hey Rick, how's it going? On eBay, a copy of the monster and treasure collection, assortment. What do they call those? I'm trying to remember now. Oh, I can find it real quick on my thing if I'm... Monster and Treasure Assortment. Yeah. And there was one which was the whole collections, sets 1 to 3, levels 1 to 9. And so I picked it up, which is to say I bid on it and won. And okay, shipped. Let me just check, see how soon it's coming to me. So now I'm curious. But this is one of those things that they started doing as GM's aids in the late 70s, early 80s for first edition. There it is. It says I'll get it on Christmas Eve. I dare say I will probably either get it. I probably won't get it by then. I've got something else I've had due for a while that has not managed to make it out of Chicago yet. Chicago, sadly, with the crisis, a lot of people unwell. Post office rocked as hard as anybody, especially in the city. I'm sure they are scrambling to try to do everything they can to keep the mail on time, but good luck. So I am not surprised by any delays coming through that hub. I've had things that haven't come through that hub that I've been very lucky. Weren't slowed down in any way. So, all in all, it's been a pretty good season. In any event, on the Rogues Gallery, followed by adventure modules and a variety of character sheets. So, the geomorphs, the assortments, adventure modules, character sheets, those are all supplemental materials for Dungeons and Dragons. some of which, since Judges Guild was putting them out, and he doesn't mention roll aids here, but they had a number of early AD&D supplements that often source books that helped out, that I think influenced TSR to go back and start doing some of that stuff on their own, like this. 1980, TSR rebooted their line of GM's aids with the Rogues Gallery. This was the first of a trio of saddle stitch GM books that TSR produced that year, each with a white cardstock cover that featured a single color of art inset at the cover's center. The Rogues Gallery was light blue. It be followed by the dark blue. It would be followed. It is followed by the dark blue Monster Treasure assortment. Sets 1 to 3, levels 1 to 9, 1980 in May. Then the red Dungeon Master Adventures Log, 1980 in December. So the assortment that I have on the way is the one that they just mentioned there. Pretty useful, I think. I actually saw a second one and threw a bid in on it because it was super low. It wasn't in the same kind of shape. But didn't win that one, so bummer there. Let's close that down. Close that down. All right. There we go. Back around to this screen. The history of NPC books. The Rogues Gallery is primarily a book of pre-generated characters. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Featuring line after line of characteristics for a variety of classes. Today it might feel a bit unnecessary because A&D and D1E characters were so simple compared to D&D 3E and later editions. However, one thing should be kept in mind. In 1980, there were almost no personal computers, though it might have been easy to generate a single character. Generating scores of them could be rather tedious, which is where the Rogues Gallery often helped. It wasn't the only book of its sort. Around the same time, RuneQuest produced a trilogy of source books that consisted of page after page of stats. Trolls and Trollkins, 1978. Scorpion Men and Brews, 1978. Militia and Mercenaries, in 1979. Meanwhile, GDW, Game Designers Workshop, published their own Traveler Supplement 1, 1001 Characters, 1978. Supporting the GM section. The Rogues Gallery goes a step further than some of its competitors by also helping GMs determine the composition of caravans, city watches, and this is where I think this book shines. Let me just back up a second. They talk about these lists and lists of pre-generated characters, and I think it's important to remember when you see something like, here, let's pop this up over here, have a look inside real quick. You'll see assassins, bards, clerics, druids, fighters, illusionists, magic users, monks, multi-class characters, paladins, rangers, thieves, and sages. Then you've got 0-level characters, but then you've got these other things that we're just beginning to talk about. Caravans, city guards, city watch, border patrols, pilgrims, bandits and buccaneers, Kawato, Kiren, and Shidu, liches, which is kind of interesting. We'll get to that. Dungeon parties and personalities. Dungeon parties, pretty useful in and of itself. $5 is so cheap these days, right? So let's look through these first sections. I think it takes us through first 27, 28 pages. Introduction talks about all the abbreviations. Make sure you understand what they mean by each of them. If you're used to first edition abbreviations, you're probably pretty good to go. Although some of these things from the monster or from the Dungeon Master's Guide at the bottom, age, appearance, possessions, might not be as immediately understandable, or might require some description. Cool picture of a roper. And here are those stats. So you see what this is. It's just a big old table, stats left to right. There are all the actual ability score stats, level, hit points, AC, all of the other stuff that it mentions on the front, all the abbreviations covered there. But you got a page of assassins, a page of bards, right? Is that even more? Druids. And some of the illustrations in here are pretty cool. There's obviously with the scimitar and no armor, a druid fighting a mind flayer. He's summoning an insect swarm, it looks like, right? Fighters. That's a pretty neat, I'd call that a concept sketch, though, really. That could use cleaning up. Illusionists, magic users, monks. I guess that's a monk there. Multi-class characters. Big old fighter. Paladins, rangers. Stick that owlbear in there. Kind of hitting on all the proprietary creatures in here. So having those illustrations around for your game, if you like to show pictures of the creatures, of the monsters. These are different ones than would have been in the player's hand or the monster manual, which is kind of neat. Let's back up a sec here. Thieves we got, and then we go to sages. Now we had that whole video on sages about a month ago or so, and there's a lot to them, and they're very useful for non-player characters that are not going to go on the adventure with player characters. All of the details of their major and minor specialties and areas of knowledge, pre-generated, about 20 different ones here. Obviously, they're being real careful to make it a pretty neat mix and a useful, each one of them. Try to make each one of them useful to a game. So it's worth noting here that this is one of those sections where having a bunch of them on hand without having to roll up all of the information you need for a sage, when all of a sudden the players say, hey, we want to go find a sage who knows about this sort of thing. Oh, this sort of thing. Okay. Well, then you could just scan down and find one that's appropriate to the situation. Underneath that, they go into 0 level characters and onto the next page, which just gives you simple information, right? Average stats, hit points, any pluses or minuses they might have off to the right. Easy to deal with those on the fly. Then it gets into that whole caravan thing. You know what? I should do this and then that. That way I can scroll past the page break. Caravans. This is another one of those sections. I know 0 level humans, you can almost just make those up in your head as you go. Although, having something random about it is not a bad thing. It keeps you from allowing your bias to to make a character a certain way in a certain situation because your brain wants you to foretell the story, which you don't often want to do. You want some randomness in this stuff, right? Caravans, again, this is another section that they talk about as being very useful because of how time intensive it is to do something like this on the fly. It has different areas of what's the word? Different areas that it needs to delineate to flesh out who's the master merchant, the number of merchants, drovers, wagons and mules, mercenary leaders, because what caravan doesn't have some guards, right? Here's your mercenary guards. Tells you what sort of stuff they would be wearing, different unit types. So depending on how valuable the caravan is, obviously the more valuable, the more that's going to be invested in guards. Adventurer followers, so there'll be some people just tagging along. Just as in almost any campaign you've ever run or played in, adventurers will hire on with a caravan if it's going in the direction they want to go, and maybe make a little scratch as guards in the process, but at least not be traveling out in the open on their own, which in original D&D and first edition D&D as well, as you know, can be quite dangerous. So then they break down a number of caravans for us. Then it gets into city guards, city watch, border patrols. These are pretty good. Fourth level fighter, third level fighter. And then you can pop over to, if they talk about, there's fighters and a magic user here and then a bunch of mercenaries. Well, it tells you what the mercenaries have, so that's easy enough. But as far as the magic user and the fighters are concerned, you can go back up in the early part of the book and just snag one off of one of the lists for fighters and magic users, for instance. Here you have broken down City Guard in general, City Watch, which is less not as dowdy, not as sturdy, right? Better armor and better weapons in City Guard than in City Watch. It's a step down. City Watch by day, City Watch by night's going to be a little stronger. They have to deal with more border patrols. So if you're moving between two lands, you might two nations, you might run into a border patrol, just keeping an eye on things, making sure. And maybe a border patrol on a vast wilderness. A nation butts up against a unclaimed territories, and out there might be anything. So these border patrols are key to making sure you're not overrun by hordes of monsters. Pilgrims, useful. A little group here or there or whatnot. I remember having a heck of a good time having a one campaign I was running. This last one, maybe a year and a half ago or so. Maybe a little longer, almost two. The player characters had found a ruined temple out on the moors and had begun exploring it. There was an old shrine there to somebody had gone out of favor, and there were crypts there, and they were digging in and looking for treasures, and at the same time clearing out the undead and whatnot. And they had went back and visited town and discussed this with some people, and regrouped so they could come back out and make a second assault. But they kind of dilly-dallied in town a little bit. And in the meantime, somebody who had heard about it from somebody who had heard about it, who was religious in nature, decided that the very existence of this location was an abomination, and they wanted to be sure it was re-sanctified and wiped out completely. And so a bunch of pilgrims were gathered, and some low-level clerics and acolytes to lead them and help deal with the ritual that they wanted to perform there. And they all marched off. And by the time the player characters got back there to reassault the underground dungeons at this location, they found that the entire mound was covered with pilgrims and clerics at the top setting up for rituals to consecrate the ground, reconsecrate the ground, and they weren't letting them pass. So they had to find a way past these things because these were not bad people. These were not evil people. They'd come out from the city in great numbers because therein lies safety. And also, they all had a certain religious zealotry to make this event happen, make this ritual happen at this location. And so they couldn't just, knock heads and get inside. They had to find a way in. They were being denied access until after the consecration, but they were on a clock themselves, so they didn't want to wait. It was a lot of fun. It put a little wrinkle into an already interesting situation. Bandits and Buccaneers next. We'll zip through this pretty fast. That's kind of self-explanatory. You don't want every group of bandits or pirates or whatever they run into to just be cookie cutter. They're all the same. A bunch of first level fighters or a bunch of 0 level fighters. This section, Kawato, Kirin, Shedu, are something I don't run. I don't do psionics, so. But if you need them, there they are. Liches, kind of neat. I do liches. I tend to put them together myself, but I'll tell you what, as a template, a 15th level magic user, formerly a cleric, both useful kind of things, and spell list, which if you don't want to pick them yourself and you wanted to make it feel more random and not be biased to be picking them in a situation when they come up, not a bad thing. Dungeon parties, this is one of the trickier things, right? Is when you have a group of other adventurers, NPC adventurers, run into the player characters. So you've got almost 3 pages of groups of adventurers, which is great. Personalities gets a little bit into the player characters that were run by some interesting people. There's Bigby is in here. Gary Gygax's character. Jean Wells has her character in here. You've got Eroc's cousin, which is one of Ernie Gygax's. Harold Johnson's got a character in here. Lawrence Schick. The excellent Alan Hammock. Helen Cook, another Gary Gygax. Mornicanen's in here. Jeff Leeson's Phobos. Is he pronounced it Phobos or Phoebus? I think it's Phobos. And some more illustrations. Another Gary Gygax. You've got another Ernie. Dave Cook's another Ernie. Errol Otis has a character in here. And there you go. It's pretty full. It's interesting as a historical thing if you want to check out how those characters were designed or were built. Those famous ones being played by the early players of the game. Then that's pretty cool too. I think that pretty much covers it. So, perfect timing. We're just out of time. Death Angel Shadow, how you doing? Go Bucks, huh? Okay. That is certainly your right to say. Let me see here. I got that. Very good. Let's cut that off. We'll turn that off there. Oops, we want to do that. And just want to say, hey, thanks everybody for popping in today. We got everybody. Oh, Death Angel Shadow. I don't have you from earlier in the week. That's cool. All right, Jeff. Well, we'll get you in there now. You made it just in time. I know you work all week. You can't be messing around with this sort of thing. We'll do this last week. I'm not sure what I'm giving away. I'm gonna have to figure it out. Pull something out of the prize closet. Go Titans? I don't know. It's Packer country around here, my friend. They're playing tonight, right? So I think there's two. I think there's a basketball Badgers and a football Badgers game during the day, and then Packers play in the evening. So there you go. Yeah, enjoy them, Rick. Enjoy the game tonight. You finally got a Saturday game, so you can have a bonfire after the game and tear it up on a Saturday night. Hopefully after a win. We'll see what Rodgers has to do. Gators are playing Alabama too. Okay, there's a classic matchup for sure. Well, I do want to thank everybody for following the show, popping in the stream chat while you're here. I appreciate that very much. I also want to say this is the last Saturday show of the year, so thank you very much for joining us for that. It was a GM review of the Rogues Gallery, a first edition AD&D Advanced Dungeons & Dragons supplemental product. This was Saturday GM's review. Tomorrow we'll do a rules retrospective, and then we'll finish up the year with the weekly news and announcements on Monday. And I also want to thank you if you're listening or watching on YouTube. I appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up on any videos you watch or enjoy. And, of course, feel free to leave comments if you have some constructive criticism, anything you'd like to add. This was the OK Grognard Show. Bye-bye.